Hi, I'm Brian Russell. I'm author of Centering Prayer, Sitting Quietly in God's Presence Can Change Your Life. And what you're about to watch is the video that Rich Lewis, who's the author of Sitting with God, and I put together as part of our July Centering Prayer gathering. This is just the first part of the gathering where we do a little teaching. This month we talk and unpack the idea of letting go and letting God. What does surrender look like, feel like? How do you do it? How can it help our lives? And how do we ultimately then take our practice of silent meditative prayer, centering prayer, and bring it into a way of living so that we can enjoy more and more of the presence of God in our lives even after we're finished with our meditation. If you'd like to be invited to future gatherings, you can sign up by visiting Rich's website, silenceteaches.com, or you can sign up at centeringprayerbook.com. That would link you to my email list. We generally gather on the third Saturday of the month, and we would love to see you at a future gathering. But without further ado, here is our talk on letting go and letting God. Yeah, so Rich, what comes to mind when you think about the topic let go and let God?
So when I think about, I guess, let go and let God, what does this mean? It means for me, go within, trust the inner wisdom and inner resources. Don't block and fight this flow. Don't block and fight the flow. Let the Spirit, act through you, through me. But it also doesn't mean do not take any action. It means our actions are infused by the Spirit within. And I think of it as when I become more and more aware of my oneness with God, that I let go and let God. It's really when I try to act on my own, I'm no longer letting go and letting God. And I equate it to centering prayer, obviously, is vital to this process. With centering prayer, we let go and open to the presence and actions of God within. We let go of our engaged thoughts and we keep coming back to God in centering prayer. Now, very similar to the Christian meditation practice that I know Teresa shares with the Christian Meditation Center. And I, read your book twice, your newest book twice. So I just finished reading it this morning for the second time. I wanted to take a second run through it. So you're doing obviously the exact same thing that I'm saying. So I'm thinking of centering prayer and even your prayer as a reverse prayer where God is praying in us during this time, and that we can take this let go posture of during our practices into our everyday life. And I need to continue to return to my practice because the let go posture and letting the Spirit flow through me needs to continue. So I need my sits, my 1, 2, or even three times sits a day. So that's what I think about when I think about let go and let God. Maybe one last thing I'll say is, as part of the process, I like to use journaling. So I like to, outside of centering prayer, journal what I think God has prayed in me, what actions God wants me to take, what things does God want me to work on in different parts of my life, whether it's personal, financial, career, family, mental, physical health. I like to jot these down and I call them my true self affirmations. And my barometer to determine whether they are true self affirmations from God or I have an inner peace and calm about them. I have an excitement about them. Many times they're outside of my comfort zone, and that's okay because God wants me to grow and explore and do new things. And lastly, they don't harm me or harm others. So if they kind of hit that criteria, then I move forward on them and I'll tweak them, sometimes remove them or postpone them. But that's kind of how I let centering prayer and journaling work as part of this let go and let God process. So I'll stop there and let you do some talking, Brian.
Yeah, and I think four short little things I can share today. I wanted to start with a Bible passage because I think there's just a good model for this. Because ultimately, what we're talking about is surrender, and we all know that surrender is well, we all know what it is, but it's probably the key to the Christian life at all different levels. Even you can go back to the first time, however you ultimately encountered Jesus for the first time, there's a point where you surrender. But as you go through life, that doesn't really stop. If you stop surrendering, you essentially are stopping growing. So surrender is kind of that kind of paradox. You grow by giving in, you overcome by letting go, and it's about releasing control. And I think a passage that isn't about contemplative practices, though it's a really helpful language that you can apply to contemplative practices. This actually applies to everything. It's Jesus's fairly famous statement that he made, shows up in Matthew, Mark, and Luke at Caesarea Philippi, or right after Caesarea Philippi, where the disciples, or namely Peter, say, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." That's how Matthew records that. And then immediately after that, Jesus gives a robust call to discipleship that goes like this. This is Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, verses 24 through 26. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. Those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life?" Again, this is Jesus's call. He's called for a whole person, essentially surrender there. And just notice how that might apply to how we think about any moment in our life, letting go and letting God. Rich connected this with not having a life of just pure quiet, because you can be active, we can work. Most of us on this call even have jobs and have things that we are doing on a daily basis. We're not cloistered in some monastery somewhere. And so when I hear this text, if anyone would come my disciple or come after me, let him deny themselves, take up the cross, and follow me. I always just picture the process of letting go and letting God. My job is to essentially follow Jesus moment by moment in my life. Now, obviously, the world is quite distracting, so I'm following Jesus, and I hear a bird sing, so I turn my head. Well, I need to surrender that and turn back around towards Jesus. So I think that's a model that I think it's a verse that we can take a hold of when we're thinking about letting go. What does it mean to let go of myself, center myself on Jesus's cross and on that cruciform life, the life of modeling the way that Jesus surrendered into the world, and then simply continually follow him. One little insight into the biblical text there's not necessarily wrong with the translation, but one of the things that gets hidden underneath some of the English translations there's three different verbs there: deny self, take up the cross, and follow me. The first two, deny self, take up the cross, those are like taking a picture of an event, like, look, this is how this happens. The follow me could be translated continually follow me. So that's the piece that gets emphasized, that it's that moment by moment walk. And a life of letting go and letting God isn't just a one-time thing, it's an ongoing basis. And so I'll come back to a quote by Merton after Rich either responds or moves the conversation ahead a little bit. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure. And again, I think, gentlemen, but it looks like Mike joined us, so welcome, Mike. Again, we're just talking about letting go and letting God, and doing this within our practices, whatever it is, whether it's centering prayer, Christian meditation, or whatever your practice is, but also taking the same posture outside of your practice into your everyday life. So a little more reflection by me on let go and let God. Centering prayer, or I'll just say contemplative prayer, helps us detach from the outcome. We let go of what we want or what we think we need or what we believe we need to do. We no longer expect things to go a certain way, and we kind of open to the present moment and do what it requires from us. And again, it doesn't mean we don't have goals or things we wish to accomplish. It simply means that we trust God. We open to the Spirit. We let Spirit act through us and flow us. And I think, in some ways we remove the pressure to get things done, because I think the pressure to get things done sometimes is a barrier to the spirit's flow. So when we just kind of let go and trust the spirit, we're lighter, we're freer, we can enjoy the process, we can have perhaps even have fun with the next steps, and it can become a little more effortless. And I think of, well, how has it been effortless for me? When I give a talk like this, sometimes I have things I want to say, and then other times I'm just letting it flow and trusting that what I need to say will happen and be spoken. And I do the same thing at work. My day job is I work with corporate accounts in the 401k space, and I just have to trust when I speak to a client that I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to say and react how I need to react. So I'm letting go and trusting God in that process as well, trusting my inner wisdom. I'm detaching from the outcome and just kind of getting into the flow. So those are just some more thoughts on letting go and letting God. And sometimes it's not easy to define how you do it. You just have to practice letting go and letting God. Or I think it was almost 2 years ago, I spoke at a Centering Prayer Summit by Keith Christich. So not this January, but the past January. And I had to give a talk, and it had to be about 45 to 50 minutes. And I remember I put it together and then I practiced it, and it was about 20 minutes. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But I just trusted. It ended up going 45 minutes, and I just let go and let God. And I had my outline and I had my PowerPoint, but then I just spur of the moment would say other things that I didn't even know I was going to say, because I just trusted my inner wisdom and guidance. I trusted God. So we just need to detach from the outcome and trust the process. So those are a little more reflections on let go and let God. I'll turn it back over to you, Brian.
And I've been reading. Actually, I read this book twice the last month. It's Thomas Merton book, and I hadn't read it before. It's his book on. It's just called Contemplative Prayer. It's very thin, very rich, and a fantastic quote I wanted to share, where he actually uses the language of let go, is from page 67. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm also going to share in a couple minutes a quotation from Pseudo Dionysius. And again, all of these writers in this contemplative tradition are drinking out of the same well. And we've talked, and you can go back and look at some of our past conversations. We talked about the cloud of unknowing a lot, and the whole basis there is you move beyond all your previous conceptions of God, and you move beyond by letting them go. And so one of the things that we don't always talk about in the spiritual life is you have to let go of any conceptions in your mind at all. It doesn't mean that you're not orthodox or that you don't believe things, certain theological positions, but these are practices. Contemplative prayer, centering prayer, these are via negativa practices. These are the way of unknowing versus the way of knowing. And Merton's writing in this long tradition, and let's just hear his again. I think it's a brilliant quote. It says, "Only when we are able to let go of everything within us, all desire to see, to know, to taste, and to experience the presence of God, do we truly become able to experience the presence with the overwhelming conviction and reality that revolutionize our entire inner life." Now, that's a really interesting quote, especially if you look at that middle part, because most of us are here because we actually want to experience God's presence. But the irony is you have to actually even let go of that desire to actually sometimes get into that space where the God, really the God beyond God, the true God, the living God, the God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, and all the things that we say, that God actually appears when on the other side of letting go of any kind of conceptions we have or feelings. And so just we can sit on that quote. And I just want to read it one more time. And again, I can't even do justice to the brilliance in that. Only when we are able to let go of everything within us, all desire to see, to know, to taste, to experience the presence of God, do we truly become able to experience that presence with the overwhelming conviction and reality that revolutionize our entire inner life. So yeah, Rich, I have like two more things I want to say after this, but let me bounce it back to you.
Okay. I'm going to read a quote. There's kind of a fun quote by Cynthia Bourgeois, where she mentions, "We spend so much of our adult energies thinking, planning, worrying, trying to get ahead or stay afloat, that we lose touch with that natural intimacy with God deep within us." So, as I reflect upon that, any type of contemplative prayer practice can help us, reclaim this natural intimacy with God that often hides deep within us, but gets pushed down by all of our adult duties and things we need to do. If you think of it, when you were children, we possibly had no worries. We enjoyed life. We were spontaneous. We saw things as if they were for the first time. We walked with a sparkle and wonder, in our eyes, and each day was new and full of all kinds of adventure and discovery. Then as adults, we have many responsibilities, bills to pay, earn a living. Perhaps we have children and we need to take care of them. Um, we often can lose our innate ability, this spontaneity. So again, a practice such as contemplative prayer, whatever your practice is, can really reconnect us to God, help us let go uh, of all of this stuff, and kind of reconnect to God and rekindle the joy for life, that God truly wants us to have. And we can then greet each day with curiosity and wonder and joy. So these type of practices are wonderful ways to let go and just enjoy the present moment, enjoy God, and enjoy life.
Good. And I'm going to add to that. This is I've been reading Pseudo Dionysius. That's a fake name. Obviously, his name wasn't Pseudo, but he called himself Dionysius the Areopagite. And those of you who have read the Book of Acts recently, you may remember that when Paul goes to Athens, and he's talking to the Greeks, there's a guy there, and so this person wrote in like the 5th or 6th centuries, after Christ, and he just used the biblical character's name to teach. And this is from his book, The Mystical Theology, and I'll put the quote up. And I'm going to read two quotes, but I have the first one's really an interesting metaphor. So when we're talking about letting go and letting God, and by the way, Pseudo Dionysius, direct predecessor to the Cloud of Unknowing, those of you who like to look at kind of historical progressions. And when you read this guy's works, you can actually hear the words from the Cloud of Unknowing within it. But he uses a really interesting analogy, which is this quotation. This is from the first paragraph in chapter 2, about how what it means to sort of, he doesn't use the language let go and let God, but notice this metaphor he uses. He says to praise the transcendent one. And if you don't know all that fancy word, that's the idea of God outside of creation. God is transcendent. He's outside of creation. He's beyond words, all of those things. So the idea of the invisible creator God, the transcendent one, in a transcending way, namely through the denial of all beings. We would be like sculptors who set out to carve a statue. They remove every obstacle to the pure view of the hidden image, and simply by this act of clearing aside, they show up the beauty which is hidden. Michelangelo later is going to have the same kind of a quotation. He was asked, how did he carve David? If you've ever seen his magnificent statue, David, and he goes, well, I just took away everything in the marble that wasn't David. And obviously Pseudo Dionysius is even earlier, but there's that idea of a sculpture. Inside of every block of marble is the statue ultimately. And Dionysius here is suggesting that the way that we conceive God normally, there's a lot of extra stuff on that needs to be essentially let go of in order to actually encounter God as at the deepest kind of level. God is God. God is pure love. And so he's describing that. And then I'm going to add a second quote. This comes from just a few paragraphs later. It's a really short book, so it's in chapter 3. He's talking about, this will sound like the Cloud of Unknowing. He says the fact is that the more we take flight upwards, the more our words are confined to ideas we are capable of forming, so that now as we plunge into that darkness, which is beyond intellect, we shall find ourselves not simply running short of words, but actually speechless and unknowing. Uh, I like that piece and this idea of the statue is because as we lean into surrender, and let's face it, it's scary sometimes to surrender. It's sometimes scary to actually let go of old stories that we tell ourselves, even conceptions of God that may frighten us. I was preaching in Melbourne, Florida late last month, and I was preaching in Philippians where it talks about work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And I did a really good job of kind of laying out what that meant, which did involve being terrified of God. And this woman came up afterwards and she goes, I have real high anxiety. And that verse just scares me to death. The idea that I'm supposed to be fear and trembling before God. And a lot of us are like that, right? But here's the question becomes then, are we able to let go and lean in and just make ourselves completely vulnerable? Because that's what surrender is, right? And these authors that this Dionysius is describing that letting go and literally embracing what sometimes in the soul feels like just pure void and darkness. And that in embracing that, you ironically, or maybe precisely because of that full surrender, that's when you actually enter into the space that you would actually call contemplative prayer, where God is praying into us. But it's by not being, but it's by being unafraid to let go of everything, even our grounding, to simply be lost completely in God's presence. That was a little long, Rich. My last one won't be quite like that, but you got one more, and then I'll share my last idea.
Sure. And this is just a short paragraph I'll read. I read a book by Paul R. Smith. I think it was in 2018 it came out. So I'll read this paragraph because I think it kind of goes along with our topic. The book was called Is Your God Big Enough, Close Enough, You Enough? Jesus and the Three Faces of God. But I thought the idea of, letting go and let God and really becoming one with God. Is what we end up doing when we completely let go. So I'll read this short paragraph. One of the earliest Christian beliefs was called deification, divinization, or theosis. It meant participating in God's divinity by coming into the union with God that Jesus demonstrated. This results in our being one with God. It means knowing God like Jesus knew God. He knew that God was not only beyond him and close to him, but that in some way God was him. He claimed to be acting and speaking on behalf of God. Like Jesus, we are also one with God. We are God's mind, heart, hands, and feet here on earth today. Like Jesus, we are fully human and fully divine. We are God's children, acting as full participants in our Father-Mother divinity by overcoming our mistaken identity that we are separate from God. This oneness consciousness moves us to act as divine agents in healing the earth, overcoming poverty, eliminating hunger, stopping oppression, and ending war. It motivates us to share the good news that we all belong to God and one another. So I just thought that was a terrific paragraph, which if we truly let go and let God, a lot of what he mentioned in there begins to happen. And then we think of them as miracles, and they're not really miracles. They happen because we become one with God.
Yeah, and I want to end today before we do our centering prayer time with a story. This is a beach story, and I live in Orlando, Florida, so I can go either direction and hit a beach in my state. And actually, my wife and I were just at the beach this last week. But this happened back when my kids were very young, so this is probably 15 years ago. But we were over at Cape Canaveral, and it was in the springtime, and so it wasn't like a get in the water day. It was like a sandcastle day and a beach walk day. And so we were walking north along the Atlantic coast of Florida, and we were heading up to the Cape, and actually to where the jetty is, where sometimes you can see submarines and other in cruise ships. They all come out of the same space. And so we were walking up to look at the boats, and my two daughters run ahead because there was this thing that was on the beach that clearly didn't belong there, but I couldn't see what it was. And they ran ahead, and then I can just hear them squealing like little girls do, and they're super excited about something. And it was this blue thing that was sticking out of the sand. And as we got closer, it was obvious what it was. It was like an abandoned, it was trash. It was one of the 5-gallon paint buckets like you can get at Home Depot or at Lowe's, but it was stuck in the sand sideways. So it looked funny, or diagonally in. And then what was interesting about it, what my girls, they weren't neglected. So they got excited. They found a blue bucket on the beach, but on the bucket was all of these, these little barnacles had attached to it, and they were still alive. And so you could see them kind of coming out of the little hole. They were trying to breathe. And what was interesting is they were surrounded on all sides by seagulls. And you could see like these seagulls were just ready to move in and have a feast. And my daughters go, Dad, we have to save these things. And I'm like, okay, it'll be easy. I'll just pull the bucket out and we'll throw it back into the ocean. So I was almost a polluter, but it didn't do it because I couldn't get the bucket out of the beach. It had sucked into the sand. And so I'm like, I couldn't pull, and we didn't have a shovel, and it was deep enough that there was just this massive vacuum, and I just wasn't going to happen. So I'm like, okay, I'll just peel the barnacles off the bucket and throw them back into the water. But the second I did that, I pinched on one. I literally crushed it in my hand and killed it. I quickly threw it behind me so my daughters didn't see that. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing we can do about this. And, I distracted my girls and I said, hey, let's get ice cream. But, as I'm walking away, the sun is baking, this bucket stuck in the sand. The tide isn't going to come in quickly enough to get them out. The birds, so these barnacles either going to die from getting eaten by a bird, or they're going to dry up in the ocean or from the sun. And as I walked away, I'll never forget it. I thought to myself, wow, at some point it made 100% sense for those barnacles to attach to this bucket. But now, because they're unable to let go, this is going to be it for them. They're going to die today. And I've always thought that's a really powerful spiritual metaphor. And so before we go into our prayer time, I would just invite you to think, about your own beliefs, your fears, maybe guilt you're carrying, shame, anxiety, conceptions of God, places where you think you need to be to encounter God's presence. And I wonder what it would look like to actually have the courage to let go of everything as we go into our prayer time today, so that we ultimately don't end up like a barnacle, just kind of stuck in some past, rather than bask in the presence that God has for us moment by moment in our lives. And thank you for listening to this month's gathering. We will regather next month on the third Saturday. And again, if you're interested, please sign up at centeringprayerbook.com or at silenceteaches.com. And if you have any questions, you can reach me, Brian Russell, at deepdivespirituality@gmail.com. Love to help you in your own practice, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.